time for another medieval combat video review, this time by request off of Reddit. And this is a tournament of SCA combat held in the year 2019. I believe it's called Steppes Warlord, and it was held in Onsteora, which I believe is around Dallas, Texas. So in this case we have two gentlemen. I don't know either of them, so I apologize if I pronounce either of them wrong. But on the left is Duke Jean-Paul, or JP I think he's called. And on the right is Duke Jason. This is the tournament finals. And because it's SCA combat, just for a little bit of quick context, it's unchoreographed combat. You need to strike your opponent hard to the head or body to win. If you strike in the leg or in the arm, your opponent gives up the use of that limb. And you're invulnerable in the hands, knees, shins, and feet. So that's why you'll see nobody throwing for the shins or knees. That's the rules of SCA combat. Let's take a quick look at this bout and see what there is to see. As always, I'll sort of play things through, and we'll do one exchange at a time, and we'll sort of break them down in slow motion after that. So right off the bat, we see these two gentlemen, both right-handed, both fighting with center grip shields. One of them... Oh, you know what? I had it backwards. I think Jason is on the left, Jean-Paul is on the right. My mistake. So Jason's shield has a little bit of extra length at the bottom, and it looks like his grip goes straight up and down on the rectangle. And Jean-Paul's looks like it's at a bit of a diagonal angle, the handle. No, actually the handle does point straight up and down. He's just got his hand rotated. So that's important to know because you'll know which ways you can pivot the shield relatively easily. Here we see JP is continuing to press Jason. Jason's staying at range and attempting to sort of cut off parts. He's not throwing a lot of combos. He's aiming for openings. You see a little inside shield contact. So that's a pretty good set of passes. That's about almost a minute of fighting. Let's go back and break down some of what we saw. Alright, so again, right off the bat, we notice their weapon styles are quite similar. They're both fighting with swords that allow them to stab. Their shields are actually quite similar, but they're rotated in different directions. So you can see that JP holds his shield rotated that direction. His handle's actually this way. And, you know, the handle here is there and the shield isn't rotated at all. There's advantages and disadvantages to both of those things. And then also this shield, instead of being square, is actually rectangular. So that gives a little bit more leg protection. I think my suspicion is this point is kicked out this way and rotated that way to create a point to protect this leg here. So that point actually offers some proactive defense. As I said, knowing which way the handle is pointed is important because it means, like for instance, if you were to stab here or here on the shield, it's relatively strong because it's right along the handle. However, if you were to stab here or here, it would pivot the shield and rotate around the handle. The only thing holding it in that orientation is the grip. And then you notice one other thing. If you take a look, he's actually reinforced the shield along this side. So if you were to stab anywhere here, here, or here, the arm or elbow are actually going to stop that shield from rotating. So the only way to really rotate the shield is that way, by stabbing, you know, over on this side of it. So again, just things to take note of when someone's got their shield, especially if it's out away from their body. You can see that Jason's shield is a little closer to his body, which he can afford to do because it's a little longer and offers a little more leg protection. Now, if you also look, another thing you're going to see is they both tend to bias towards their sword foot forward. That gives them more range and offense. It does open up the left side of their body to attacks a little bit more, but it means that they both got relatively strong range. If you also look, one of the things that I'm noticing a lot is if you take a look at the hip movement, you see both of them using really good hip mechanics just to start power in their shots, but also to feint and to get ready to throw blows. There's a little drop to drive power. The hand comes out. That drop, this initial drop here, looks like it's maybe going to be a leg shot, so it could be a feint or it could just be a way that he generates power. But either way, JP's not buying it, and you see he brings this tip of his sword over to protect his head instead of moving his shield up to protect his head. Right, so, and a little bit of weak footing there. We set back up again, and you can tell this is the range at which Jean-Paul wants, and it looks like JP's trying to get a little closer. I'm sorry. This is the range that Jason on the left wants, and JP is trying to get a little closer. I'm going to say it's because they're both Dukes and they're wearing black and yellow, but the truth is, I just don't know either of these gentlemen, so I apologize if I refer to either of them incorrectly. So look at the mechanics as Jason drives some power with his hand. He drops the hand, the tip comes forward, and he's now coming back up. Looking at the fact that the blade is pointed straight at us, this reads to me as an offside here. But he's gotten power into it by dropping his hand and chambering his arm. So now this arm is chambered up, and there's some power in that tricep. He can uncork and go forward with the offside. And he's aiming for that slot that's created. If you look at this angle here, as a part of the defense, well, that's not quite the right angle, is it? But right here, as a part of this defense of keeping the shield rotated, there's a gap there, and the way that Jean-Paul is going to cover that gap is by fading out. So you see he gets tapped in the helmet just by the tip of the sword, not quite deep enough. And also, if we take one more look at this shot, it involves a lot of body movement this way and a lot of footwork to make the shot almost land. And if JP hadn't gotten out, see that forward diagonal and then lateral movement on that shot to try to drive some power behind the sword. But because it was just out on the tip of the sword, not hard enough. So JP got just out of distance for that being a hard shot. Standard offside leg, just skipped off the shield. And maybe hit him in the shin a little bit. And here, another thing that's really interesting, this sword guard and this sword guard are actually quite different in terms of their opportunities and threats. If I'm looking at Duke Jean-Paul right now, it looks to me like his sort of bread and butter from this stance is going to be an offside shot into that area. So we'll see if he wants to throw those. There's that offside, right? So you can tell from this position, and I promise I hadn't memorized that, but this position with that sword and that guard and the hand forward is reading for a deep offside shot. So the way he does that, drops the hand for power, lifts the hand up, that drives more power into the tricep. And as soon as you see someone with their sword torqued this way and their arm bent at 90 degrees, it means they're going to want to uncork into that armpit. Now, in this case, I think it just skims over the top of the block, and then there's a straight counter punch coming straight down into the shield from Jason. One other thing to note here is in this range, this is the range that I think Duke JP wants to be in, and also if you pay attention to the ropes, the edge of the Eric is behind them. So they're almost out of space. He's basically driven him into the corner, which makes it more difficult for Jason to get out of harm's way. Now in this case he throws a little low. That probably hits just that corner of the shield. There, bang, and then drops into the knee. And at this point, however, he's stepped enough to the side that he does have an exit. And at this point, honestly, I think Jean-Paul is letting Jason out of the corner. Like that, right? If he had taken a step this direction at this point, he could keep Jason cornered. Now, that may or may not be a strategy that he wants to employ. If you keep someone cornered, it means they don't have a lot of room to run back. If they run out of bounds several times, they get a couple warnings and then they default the fight. So either he's letting his opponent out or it's just subconsciously. He's either done it consciously or subconsciously is what I should say. But you can see as he's getting out of the corner, Jason is throwing shots to try to maintain that maximum distance that he wants. That's the range I want you at. And I'm going to keep using footwork. Now, he does step in here because, look, he's gone back against, you can see the marshal has stepped in to make sure that he doesn't go too far out of bounds. He's let himself get pushed against the ropes again. So he drives his momentum forward a little bit here, gets big. Now they're both using their opponent's shield to protect from offside shots and their own shields to protect from onside shots. Both of them have their legs fairly open, but there's going to be good elbow to shield contact, so you can kind of feel where your opponent's sword is, even though you can't see it. So you're staring in each other's eyes at this point, but you can sort of feel where each other's weapons are. And if you throw for a low shot, your opponent's going to feel it. There's that low shot, and see, Jean-Paul could feel it because he's got that shield contact, so he knows that it's coming. Now, at this point, it might be a bad body position for him, I'm not sure, but it looks to me like a good opportunity for Jean-Paul as he steps back to throw a moulinet down the body slot in the center here. If he can keep his elbow inside the shield here, if he can keep his elbow inside as Jason drops his own sword, so as the sword comes down this way, there's an opportunity, in my opinion, to drop this elbow here, move the hand over, drop the blade, and then end up throwing right for a slot here, especially as he takes a step out to the side, right? So let's see, right here it feels like there's a chance, but now his elbow's gotten outside his opponent's shield. Now his elbow's on the outside, that means he's going to push the shield into blocking it himself. So if he could keep the elbow inside, I think there's a good opportunity to just cork into the body there. If that makes any sense, it's a little hard to describe from this angle, but his elbow's on the outside, so he's sort of not able to throw it. Back out of range. And here you can see, in my opinion, they're both maintaining relatively steady range. Duke Jean-Paul's not charging, but he is maintaining pressure, and Jason is equally giving ground. So that tells me Jason wants a little bit longer range fight, and Jean-Paul wants a little closer range fight, but neither of them are going to do dramatic footwork at this point to maintain it. Now look at the timing of this thrust. Jason's taking steps back, plants the foot, takes a half step back, throws his hips back to break the rhythm and throw the thrust. Now, Jean-Paul blocks it, but it's neat. So if you watch his footwork, he's throwing an off-tempo thrust, right? So he's going step, 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 half step thrust, right? And that's actually, he throws his butt out to get extra momentum on that thrust. So it would have been a nice hard thrust if it had landed, but Jean-Paul's got the defense there. But it's neat the timing on that thrust. And as you can see here, he keeps jumping back. He's using really active footwork. He's trying to cut for openings. They're both actually cutting for openings. They're not throwing combos into each other's shields in the hope that they're opening up. They're throwing for openings. And once again, Jason's got himself in the corner, and Jean-Paul, at this point, is able to get in. Now, I'm not sure that Jean-Paul likes this, chest-to-chest range more. It seems like he wants more of a short, medium range as opposed to like a very short range. But at this point, again, Jason's run out of room, so he's got to get in there, and they go to the same position. Now, they're both still feeling, and you can see Jason goes for a slot shot here, try to short stick him in the head. The shield's in the way. Throws. This is really cool. I like this mechanic. So this first shot, as he throws, he's going to get power for a second shot. So the hand comes down. Watch what his hips and feet do. He's jumped a little bit. He's landing. The hand goes up again to throw that shot. And this time, Jean-Paul has done a hanging sword defense. From that position, again, this is where I really want his elbow on the inside of that shield. If he was able to get that guard on the inside of the shield, once he does the hanging block, he can chop for that slot again. But it's on the outside, so he can't quite do it. Now, it looks like he's looking for a thrust himself, but at this point, they disengage. All right. Now, this is a point where I have to admit, I missed something. The first time I watched this, I didn't see the leg shot, and it takes a second to register. So in here, there's a leg shot. Let's see if we can spot it. Thrust, no. Overhead, no. Overhead snap, I should say. Maybe there. And as they get big, there's that. Yeah, I'm not sure where that leg shot comes in. And it's one of those ones, again, because it's, he's doing the honorable thing here and saying, I felt something sort of questionable maybe earlier. It took me a minute to notice it. I didn't notice it in the fight either. So from this point, he's going to fight from his knees. So he's going to turn him out of the sun to start so he doesn't have to look up into the sun as a chivalrous move, just as an initial orientation. And from this point forward, Duke Jean-Paul needs to fight from his knees. So let's observe this at full speed again until we see the end of this exchange. So again, you see Jean-Paul is actually closing range because Jason seems to want to fight at that maximum range, and Jean-Paul wants to get a little closer, so he's actually slowly shuffling forward. Jason's cutting for openings again along the edges of the shield or anywhere the shield and sword are parallel. There's a gap. You can see he's rotating to the right. Most right-handers will rotate to the right. So as Jean-Paul sort of slowly chases him down from his knees, Jason's rotating generally clockwise. And he's hoping that Jean-Paul's sword is going to leave an opening, so when Jean-Paul throws, the head is open. So he keeps counter-chopping for that head. Not available, because Jean-Paul is able to get the sword back over for that block really quick. Here we see Jason starting to get cornered, throws a deep pendulum slot shot. Again, a good sword block from Duc Jean-Paul. So Duc Jean-Paul, you'll notice, is using the shield for sort of passive defense. It's the areas where Jason can't throw, and the sword is providing the active defense and blocking most of it. So he's not moving his shield around and moving it out of the way. He's using his sword to provide a lot of the defense. And again, if I'm Jason, it looks to me those are the two shots that Jean-Paul has from that sword position, is either a punch offside to the eye or a quick rotation above into an onside shot to the top of the crown there. There was a punch offside for the body or leg there. Not too hard to defeat from that position. You notice also it looks a little bit like Jason's just waiting for that sword to come out. And in this case, Jean-Paul not quick enough to use his sword for both offense and defense. So let's take a look at this exchange, or this series of exchanges. And we'll break it down. This one is a little tricky, and it is an SCA silliness that people fight from their knees. So I don't want to spend too much time talking about like the technique of fighting from your knees. But you'll notice that Jean-Paul is not leaning back too far. He's keeping his weight relatively forward. He's not. Some people will tend to do things like lay their back on the ground and spring back up again. And different areas allow a different amount of crowding. But regardless, Jason's trying to manage this fight at a range where it's not unfair. Jason's sword's not longer. If Jason can hit JP, then JP can hit Jason's arm at the very least. But he doesn't want to get real close. And you see that from the fact he keeps giving ground. But he's also throwing, once again, you see anywhere you see a parallel sword and shield, that leaves a gap. He's throwing for that gap with that offside. And that shield comes up a little bit to block in this case. He doesn't drop his sword down in front of the shield to block it. He goes forward, and now he's looking for that offside. Doesn't see it, so he keeps here. If he had thrown, like you can tell he's chambered up. He's chambered for that offside. He wants to hit Jason in the arm. Jason's out of range. The shield's in the way. If he throws this offside right now, it's going to leave his head open. So instead, leaves it there and gets the block. Now, that was way out at maximum range. It might have just been the thrusting tip anyway, but you can see this is one of those reasons why you don't necessarily want to throw the shot that you're hungry for, because you need the defense at the same time. Okay, from this position, you see Jason at this point. This is the sword guard he used mostly when fighting a standing opponent. Watch where his sword position drops now. Sort of to more of an, I would say this is it's escaping me, but sort of more of a boxer's guard. So now the hand's here, the blade's here, and the hand's here. Ish. Sorry, I'm not drawing very well. And you can see he's moving back and forth between those two positions. He's also starting to kick that shield. This was generally a little bit more vertical before. I think he's starting to turn it that way to protect that sword leg a little bit. Because that sword leg, that right leg of his, is one of the few things that's vulnerable to an offside right now. But you can see he really wants that shot along the top. So as soon as the offense comes out, he's throwing for the head. But the sword comes back to block, right? There's another shot. He had to step back to avoid that one. But if he had still stayed in range, he'd probably be trying to throw a counter while the sword's out of the way. So there's a shot. As soon as he sees the offense come from JP, I want to throw. But again, this time the shield edge just picks it up. And the sword was there maybe catching it a little bit as well. Right? So he's counter-punching. He's waiting for JP to throw, and then he's throwing a counter-punch because he knows that that sword is being used for defense as well as offense. In this case, he throws the counter before the shot really even comes. This is just, from JP, this is just a little probing thing with his sword. He's not throwing it hard. There, just probing the edge. Maybe keep your arm back type thing. Keep you busy, and then boom, throws. Now, JP's pretty easily defends that because he's got the hanging guard, and that first shot wasn't an overcommitment. It was actually just probing. This time, he throws a neat feint, and it looks like he's trying to throw maybe a back blade. So this time, Jason actually takes the initiative, steps right, plants his foot, drops the hand for power, and then it looks like it's going to be an onside shot at this point, but instead he goes over and tries to throw. No, that's a front edge shot for the body, but it catches the shield and sword. And again, he's still getting back out of range. So here we get to see some of these exchanges from this side. Right? So same guards we've seen before. And from here you can kind of see more easily where your targets are probably going to be if you're JP, right? And you can see he's got pretty good defense. This defense here, especially with a little bit of body lean, JP is pretty well defended from anything like an offside. That sword is nice and high. I would say that the vulnerable spots that he's got are if Jason steps in, there's the opportunity for a back edge wrap here. There's the opportunity for a back edge wrap here. There's the potential of a thrust, an underhanded thrust there. And then otherwise, it's the shot that we're seeing him throw over and over. Instead of a back edge wrap to the back of the head, it's a four-edge shot here. Then there's also, last but not least, the opportunity to throw for this gap. That offside, though, I don't think this is a real shot. Not necessarily. Maybe he's going for a thrust, actually. And here's a place where you see if Jason steps to his right, he's actually going to step right into that sword, but he picks it up with his basket hilt, and look at how close that countercut is. Like, these guys are getting real close to each other. Really precise fighting. Look at that. Zing. Real close. And those little hand baubles, by the way, those are actually trying to get each other to that. Like, those are baits, those are feints. Amongst two dukes, those things are like billboards saying, you know, I'm doing something. And what it is that it looks like it's doing, it might be just trying to get you. If your opponent is keyed up and looking to counter, when you see this hand bauble, that might get you to throw. Sorry, I went back not far enough. This here, as soon as you see the hand pop up, that looks like an onside shot. That's a fake of a shot right here. Second one, that's a fake for an offside shot right there. So by doing that hand bobble, they're with intent. It's trying to get Jean-Paul to feel like a shot's coming. Now this one feels like, uh-oh, now he's exposed. That shoulder's open. And the reason why his shoulder doesn't get hit right here is because it's brought the shield over. With the shield over, this hand can't drop because his own shield's in the way, and that's what's actually protecting Jean-Paul's shoulder at this point. So, I went a little too fast there. So here once again, and we've seen this guard drop what was previously a high guard with the hand, so the hand's like this. Now this hand is dropped down here, and the blade orientation being more like that early in the fight is now here, right? So that's more of a sort of boxer's guard. And at this point, I think, as we know, he's looking to counterpunch when he sees that sword come. So there's that shot. Almost catches the eye, right? Like if he's able to throw, look at the gap that Jean-Paul's throwing for. It's this little gap right here, right? So he actually manages to throw accurately there, but the shield moving just a little bit like it did from here to here is enough to defeat that shot and push it just over, right? So that tiny little gap, he manages to hit it, and he's tracking, he moves the hand over to get it, but that little pop of the shield is enough to move it out of the way. And now at this point, he's in a little bit of trouble because his own blade is between his opponent's sword and shield, right? So this is one of those things I wish I was better at. Anytime someone recovers, there's an opening along that line of recovery. So if you look at the line of recovery, sword comes back, and the other sword can follow it. So as Jean-Paul's sword comes back, and it's got to come back at a funny angle, because it can't pull back straight through the shield. If you look, his hand is crossed over, and the blade is laying out, his palm is facing up. He can't just pull the sword back. He's got to rotate it a little bit. So you'll see the blade rotate through the air as it comes back. And following the same rotation around the edge of the shield, if Jean-Paul's hand can get around the edge of the shield, then Jason can throw a parallel shot around the edge of the shield. And there's that counter snap that he'd been looking for. So anyway, really cool fight. Again, I apologize if there were a couple times I accidentally swapped their graces and spoke one's name for the other. I probably did it more times than I thought. But really cool fight. Thank you very much for recommending this tournament on Reddit for me to review. And if you found this to be useful, please let me know in the comments below. If there are other fights that you would like to recommend, feel free to message them to me. It's getting to the point where I think I've gone through most of the tournament footage I'm aware of. So if you've got good fights that you think might be worth breaking down, yeah, they don't have to be your fights. You can send me good tournament footage of anyone. Send it my way. Leave it as a comment, and I'll do my best to review, and we'll keep momentum going into 2020. Thanks.